Hello, I'm Robin Vincent and welcome to the September edition of Molten Music Monthly. Right, so the summer's over and we're back into the real world of an autumnal feel where things start to flow in terms of music technology. We're now on that slippery slope towards Christmas, and who knows what could appear in the next couple of months. But what I have for you now is a roundup of what happened during the weeks in September. This is my little roundup of the best gear, the best bits of software, hardware, synthesizer, bits and pieces that emerged from the general background noise of the sort of technology that we seem to be endlessly fascinated with. So, coming up this month, we have the entirely new and yet strangely familiar BASSYNTH. Hydrasynth is an 8-headed wavetable monster. I have a DinoPark DSP box to let loose. Roland buys Stagelight and then releases a whole wave of stuff that might be awesome. The Modal Argon8 is going to do battle with the Hydrasynth. Buchla rejuvenates some vintage synths for old surfer dudes. And then Erica Synths goes and borrows the Buchla preset card for its new mini modular system. I finally find the brush kit I've been after all these years. G-Storm puts an MS-101 into Eurorack. Dreadbox gives us an Antiphon, but I'm sure they're hiding a lot more stuff. Expert Sleepers have a new interface. Moog re-releases the Model 10. Novation comes up with the coolest mini keys around. Analogue Solutions unveils Colossus. There's a bit of a sort of Greek, kind of a myth theme going on this month, I think. And Argentina has come up with a polysynth called Zeus. And for once, there'll be no Behringer this month because Uli has decided that he doesn't approve of journalism. But first, Synthfest. Synthfest. What's Synthfest? Synthfest is this fantastic synthesizer festival. It's in the UK, up in Sheffield kind of way. And it's an awesome day where we all get together in a bit of a hall type place and get to play on synthesizers and talk to manufacturers and have a poke around all the latest gear. Now, it's only been going a handful of years, and I first went in 2016, where I think you could say I had a bit of an epiphany about hardware synthesizers and Eurorack. It's what pushed me over the edge into that journey into this extraordinary world of modular synthesizers. It was the catalyst for my catapulting out of software into hardware. And so I kind of see Synthfest as a bit of a pilgrimage, a bit of an anniversary of my renewed fascination with bits and bops and things and all that kind of jazz. But this year's a little bit more special because I'm doing something, I'm participating, I'm taking part. I've been invited by Sound on Sound, who are the people who are behind the Synthfest, to do a bit of a seminar. I mean, what's kind of awesome about this is that when I first went in 2016, I watched a seminar all about getting started in Eurorack. You know, it was a bank of people who I didn't know at this point, probably still don't know, but I mean, DivKid was part of that panel, and it was kind of the first time I became aware of him, and they presented this forum, this chat about Eurorack, about what it was all about. I didn't understand a single word. I sat there stroking my chin, thinking, what are they talking about? Not because they were unintelligible, but because the distance of travel from where I was to where they was so enormous, was so insurmountable that whatever it was that they were saying, there's no way I was going to understand it because there were so many basic, simple concepts that I didn't really have. I mean, I've been playing with synthesizers all my life, but I didn't understand the first thing about them, really. At least that's what seemed to emerge as I was listening to people talking about Eurorack. I was chatting to people about it. I was seeing it happen and things plugging into each other. I'm just going, oh. And so in some ways it's sort of a testament to the journey that Eurorack can take you on that I find myself 3 years later doing that seminar, being that seminar, putting on a seminar myself, introducing people to Eurorack. But what I think will be awesome about it, what I hope will be awesome about my seminar, is that the way I approach it is from a position of no knowledge, from a complete numpty, from someone who doesn't have a clue. That's where I'm going to pitch it, because that's inevitably where I still am. I'm always there. I mean, I have grown and I have learned things, and that has empowered me and allowed me to bring what I've learned, my experience, my journey. I'm going to bring all of that and sort of offer it up to you. But I still approach it with a naivety and a simplicity, which I hope other people will be able to relate to. So we're just going to sit down for an hour. I'm going to bring out a bunch of modules and a case, and I'm going to start putting it together, and we're going to talk about it. And it's going to be great. So if you're around, this is October the 5th, so a week on Saturday. If you're around anywhere near the UK, then get yourself to Sheffield, get yourself to the Octagon where they host Synthfest, and get along to my seminar, and I'll be able to unveil the whole thing to you and why you should start selling stuff in order to buy Eurorack. But there's also going to be lots of other fabulous things there. There's going to be a talk on Fairlights. There's going to be other people talking about their processes. A guy called Gerald's going to be there talking about his stuff. And of course, all the manufacturers are going to be there showing their stuff, showing their modules, showing their synthesizers. You'll get a chance to play on all sorts of load of stuff, and you'll be able to hang out with like-minded synthesizer people. I'll be there the whole time. My seminar is the first one in the morning about 11:30, and then I'm doing something with a guy called Gerald later on in the afternoon. But that in-between bit, I'm going to be milling about, poking at stuff, looking awkward. So if you do come along, please do feel free to stop me and say hello and introduce yourself, and we can hang out awkwardly for a bit until one of us says, oh, I really need to get on. That would be great. But if you're not able to make it, then don't worry, because on the Sunday night after I've got home, all being well, as long as I've still got a little bit of energy and maybe a beer, I will throw together a bit of a live stream, and we can talk about what we found, what was good, what was bad, what we liked, what we didn't like, and how the heck it all went. So that's Synthfest, week on Saturday, 5th of October at the Octagon in Sheffield. Hope to see you there. Been quite a few of these bass-orientated synths cropping up from time to time. This is a new one from Alchemy. It comes with like 11 gigabytes of sound library, all of which squashes itself towards some kind of low-frequency, low-end bass mashup. Now what's interesting about this particular one is that it's full of organic sounds, full of motion. It's not just synthesizers, flipping synthesizers. No, they've sampled brass and strings and pianos and crashes and noises and bits of things clanging against each other, and then have stuffed all that together to create these bottom end noises. And one of the things that's quite remarkable in a little demo video that you see is the amount of kind of brass that's in there. Completely unexpected. I'm always expecting a big, hard, gritty, filthy analog bass sound, and then you've got these pops coming in, which is remarkable. I mean, it's different, and that makes it interesting. Alchemy go to great lengths to tell us about how wonderfully new and exciting, unique and innovative it is, which it kind of is in terms of sample library, except that the interface is the Contact one. Now I don't know about you, but I'm starting to find that all of these instruments done in Contact end up being remarkably similar. I mean, you have this a good looking front end, then you have some morphable parameters. That's where you get morphable parameters. Then you get a whole load of sort of sequence modulation that goes through it, and then a bunch of effects at the end. We're kind of finding the same engine over and over again, which is obvious because it's the Contact engine. And when developers started plumbing the depths of it, it was initially really very exciting, but now it's starting to get a bit samey. And that's a shame, because there's probably a whole great deal of fabulous library and sounds in here. It's just, it doesn't feel new and fresh somehow, which is really unfair because it probably is. But you just get that sense that we've been here before. On the flip side of that, it's a familiar interface, so you should have absolutely no trouble in running it and getting the sounds out of it that you want, and the movement and that kind of stuff, because you would have done that with half a dozen other synths before already. And I guess ultimately you have to judge these sorts of romplers, I guess we call them, by their sound library. Do they have a lot of interesting stuff? Have they recorded fabulous things that you are going to blend together in a similar way to you've done before, and mutate in perhaps a way you have before, and lay them up and sequence them and affect them like perhaps you may have done before? And ultimately it has to come down to the interest that's created in that sound library. And with BASSYNTH, I think they've certainly done something a little bit different. Now the Hydrasynth has made a bit of a splash. Everyone's going crazy for it. It's a 8-voice wavetable digital synthesizer that's absolutely covered in knobs and looks really quite imposing on the desktop as either a keyboard version or as a smaller keyboardless desktop version. Stuffed in there somewhere is 3 oscillators per voice with up to 219 waveforms to choose between. And you know, this is a wavetable synthesizer, so you've got to be thinking of morphing, got to be thinking of changing from waveform to another, mixing waveforms, and have this change of mood and modulation and motion going throughout. That is more likely what it's all going to be about. And yes, indeed, because the oscillators can morph between a bank of 8 different waveforms. And then what's interesting is that it roots into a mutation engine where you start sticking in modules. You might stick in some FM or some sync, some harmonic sweeping, or there's this stack function that'll take an incoming waveform, stack up 5 of them in layers, and then detune them. So you have this kind of fat sound that then just starts drifting apart into this lovely, rich goo of sonic loveliness. Then there's a load of filters, there's a load of envelopes, there's a load of LFOs. This is designed to push and mess stuff about all over the place. And not just within the synthesis of the modulation matrix and the way things are routed together, but you also have polyphonic aftertouch, which apparently is one of those things that people keep asking for. Well, here it is, polyphonic aftertouch. What does that mean? That means per note aftertouch, not just channel aftertouch, which is what you get on a lot of synthesizers, where you play something and then you lean on it and it gives you that sort of modulation sound kind of globally. With polyphonic aftertouch, it's more like MPE, where you're doing modulation individually to the notes that are being pressed and to the amount that they are being aftertouched, if that makes sense. The keyboard version also has a nice ribbon controller, so there's definitely echoes of the Yamaha CS80 in all of this. When they went to the desktop version, one of the interesting things they've done is that they've put a bunch of pads on. A little matrix of page, well, quite a big matrix of pads. And one of the ideas behind that is that they felt that with desktop synths, you never have any way to play it by itself. You've always got to hook up a keyboard or hook it into something else in order to get it to play. And they thought, well, it should have a way of playing itself. And so they're using these pads in order to do that. The other neat feature, at least for me, I mean, other than the big knob in the middle, we always like a big light up knob in the middle, is the module select thing. Because one of the problems with digital synthesizers, at least one of my observations of digital synthesizers, is that a lot of it gets squirreled away into menus. And that makes it less intuitive, makes it harder work, and you end up, I find, messing around on the peripheral or on the superficial on the top. Oh, look, there's the filter. Let's mess around with that. But with the Hydrasynth, they've done this slightly differently. They have this module selection matrix router, if you like, that's out there on the front panel. And basically you tap on things to turn things on and off. And that's there visually representing the algorithm, if you like, through which your waveforms are traveling. So instead of surfing through menus, you can directly select the module you want to edit, and then that becomes available through the front control panel and that nice big fat data knob. And that to me seems like a brilliant way of giving you a bit more visual feedback and hands-on control onto a digital wavetable synthesizer. Now I'm just going to jump ahead to the Modal Argon8 because it resonates very much with the Hydrasynth. I mean, you've got these 2 wavetable synths being released at a very similar time with a very similar emphasis on front panel control and the mighty morphing power of the wavetable synthesizer. So the Argon8 from Modal, you would initially think is an extension or an evolution of the Sculpt, when actually no, it goes further back. It comes from the 002, which is their hybrid big mother of a synthesizer they released in 2014. And so rather than starting with something small and, you know, exploding it, they're taking something huge and meaty and chunky and bringing it down to a more compact and affordable level, which sounds very nice. And within it there are 64 oscillators, giving you 4 per voice in all circumstances and up to 8 in other circumstances, with the potential for some enormous sounds. There's 120 wavetables to choose from, going from your standard kind of analog-y stuff through to your noise, through your vowels, through your crazy, zany, onto strange mathematical impossibilities and improbabilities. And once you've decided on your waveforms, it then goes streaming through all these wavetable processes, where it can do interesting things like wavefolding or shaping or de-resing or de-lousing. And so there emerges this huge scope for sound design and modulation and motion and movement and change, which is what wavetable seems to be all about. There's a huge modulation matrix, there's a huge arpeggiator, a huge sequencer, and the thing is completely packed full of knobs with like a little weenie screen to give you a nice waveform display. Now the Argon8 is going to be about half the price of the Hydrasynth. They're aiming for around $700, whereas the Hydrasynth is $1,599. And so it'll be really interesting to see how both of them fly sitting side by side. Are they completely different animals? Do they have anything which is similar about them? I mean, how can you have $1,600 synthesizer and a $700 synthesizer and assume that they're doing more or less the same thing because their specs seem similar? I don't know. We're going to have to wait and see. The DinoPark, I don't know what to call it, DinoPark, okay. What on earth am I talking about? Well, there's this thing called a DinoPark DSP box. I've got one here. It's in bits because it sort of comes as a kit. So there's not a whole, what could I show you? It's not a whole lot to show you. Oh, maybe I'll show you this bit. What this is, right? Many years ago, there was a company called Creamware. And Creamware, there you go, look at that. What's it all about, I hear you say? What's it all about? Well, I'm going to be doing a proper build on this very, very soon, putting it together and trying it out, because they've only just sent it to me. But what it is that many years ago, as I was saying before I interrupted myself, was a company called Creamware, and they produced a range of cards that were based on DSP. So this was at a time when that was like, what is that? This is turn of the millennia sort of time. We're talking 20 years ago. And one of the things they did is they produced a computer card, a PCI card called the Pulsar. And when you installed the Pulsar card, you were treated to this virtual environment, which included a mixer, effects, and virtual instruments. And these virtual instruments were actually really rather good. There were emulations of Moog stuff, of ARP stuff, other bits and pieces. And it's that technology that MakeProAudio have taken and stuffed into a little box. So it's strange, right? Because it's really old technology, and yet the quality of the sounds and the quality of the emulations within it were all far, far better than anything else around at the time. And they still work really well now. Well, the problem is that DinoPark and MakeProAudio have only made some really terrible videos about it. And so nobody really gets what it's about. I don't quite get what it's about. All I know is that potentially in this box of bits that I've got here, I can put together a kind of a boring looking box, but within which I can run some extraordinary synthesizer emulations and hopefully just access them with a couple of knobs on the front in order to dial up different presets and then control them and let them via MIDI. Interesting. It could potentially, within the operating system inside here, house loads and loads of different synthesizers, all in one little box, all accessible from your computer or via a MIDI controller or some other form of magic, I suppose. They're also producing a Eurorack version of this, which has all the stuff behind the front panel and allows you to plug CV into these remarkable virtual analog synthesizers. So how well is that all going to go? I've no idea yet, but I'm going to put it together over the next, probably next week or something like that, and I'll let you all know. Roland, gee whiz, what a week Roland have had. An extraordinary bunch of stuff, whole load of stuff, and some other things too. First of all, I don't know if I'm doing this in the right order, but I don't really care. They have purchased Stagelight from Open Labs. Do you remember Stagelight? I've done lots of videos on it. It's that crazy, really cool looking DAW that you can run on pretty much any machine, but in particular a touchscreen like the Surface Pro. And it's got a lot of fingery stuff, a really well designed touch interface. And it was kind of free with a few extras you could buy on, like VST support and extra loops and bits and pieces. But I liked it. It worked well, it ran well, it looked groovy, and was a perfect bit of software for someone making music on a Surface. In their latest version, they had this awesome sample verse instrument which brought in some really quite interesting sampling, but also synthesis within it as well. Plus, you could save a project, stick it up to the cloud, open it up on your phone, work on it, send it back up, bring it back on your desktop and work on it there. Really quite remarkable stuff. Anyway, Roland has bought it. Bought the whole shebang. Bought the whole lot. And now it's called Zenbeats. Of course, it's much cooler now, I think, because it's got Roland stamped all over it. And they're certainly pitching it as something that's extremely cool. Zenbeats. Yeah, maybe. I mean, essentially, it's still exactly the same piece of software with just a little bit of a tweaking to the interface. And they've thrown in a whole bunch of TR-808 and 909 and 606 and 707 type sample packs. So you've got all the classic Roland drum machines all now built in, which is great. I wonder whether they'll start building in other synths from the Roland cloud, or whether it will become kind of a delivery system or a door based in Roland cloud. I don't know. Interesting. I mean, at the moment, if you're an existing Stagelight user, you can cross-grade to it immediately and keep all your stuff and keep all your projects and keep all of the things that you bought and content and unlocks and such like. But you have to do it soon before the grace period runs out. So I've done that, and maybe if I get a chance, I'll do another review of it or just see how different it is. I mean, Roland have a bit of form for this. They did own Cakewalk at one time back in the day, although I just don't know that it ever really went that well. So it's interesting that they're buying into a DAW technology. I wonder what the plan is. Well, meanwhile, they've got a shed load of hardware to send us. Starting off with, I mean, this was a shock. I mean, it was a shock in a delightful way, and that's the Jupiter X. I mean, it's beautiful. Look at it. You know, it's screaming Jupiter 8. You're looking at it going, oh my God, it's a Jupiter 8. They're re-releasing it. No, it's the Jupiter X. Jupiter X. Oh, wow, that's going to be amazing. Isn't that going to be amazing? That could be amazing. Wow. I mean, look at it. From the looks alone, if it was all just based on looks, I would think, cool, wow, that's pretty cool and groovy. I would love to have that sitting just over there under my window on a stand. That would be lovely. Well, the thing with it is that we're not going to see it till next year. This is kind of a preview of the Jupiter X. I mean, well, stun us with the looks and then go and hide it for 6 months. I don't think that's fair. I don't think you can do that. But once you start digging in, then other things start to reveal themselves. Because initially you want it to be analog. Of course you do. You want it to be a proper synthesizer. But this is Roland. Roland are dancing to their own beat, man. They're doing what they want to do. And what they want to do is based in emulation and in virtual analog circuitry and interesting things like that. Because they believe in their own technology. And that's fine. It sounds great. It's just not exactly quite always what we want. So in this Jupiter X, as far as we understand it, we get a whole load of different forms of synthesis based on emulations of older technologies. Now, this isn't ACB technology. All the previous boutiques are based in this analog circuit behavior modeling technology, which is supposed to render the sound of old synthesizers absolutely perfectly. Which of course it does until they come out with the next thing which does it better, which is what the Jupiter X has. It has this Zen core, they're calling it. Oh look, Zenbeats, Zen core, there's a bit of a theme going on there. And this is some other form of processing. Is it DSP? I'm not entirely sure. It's probably FGPA, GP thing. It's probably some other form of processing, but it does it at a much higher resolution, and you can run, as I understand it, pretty much everything at once. So if you look at it, compare it to something like the System 8. The System 8, you could load the Jupiter 8 into it, but then you could only use that, and you were restricted to using that. With the Jupiter X, you can load up Jupiter 8, and you can load up a whole load of other things and other bits and pieces and other stuff as well, and layer it all up and do it all in crazy ways. And so the processing power has evolved and extended immensely. But what that says, unfortunately, is that you look at this wonderful looking synthesizer and then you go, oh yeah, but it's just running soft synths, isn't it? You know? Oh look, it's suddenly become a proper piano because it's now running the RD range of Roland pianos. Oh look, it's become a digital workstation because it can run all the XD stuff. And it's like, oh, that somehow ruins the illusion. It's like with the System 8. When you load up the Jupiter 8 into the System 8, it doesn't look like a Jupiter 8. You know, some of the buttons light up and some of them don't, to show you which ones are on and which ones are not. And so when you start playing it, you're going, oh, this is sounding quite nice, but you don't get the feel of that classic synthesizer. You get the sound, but you don't experience it in the right way. I mean, even with a plugin, even with an on-screen plugin, you're at least getting some kind of visual, imaginary connection between that interface and what you're doing. But you don't get that in the System 8. And that's kind of what you don't get in the Jupiter X either, because the hardware itself can't change. But I'm making this all up because we don't really know, because we haven't really seen one. What we have seen, some people have seen, is the XM. Now this is a stunted little kind of mini version of it, which is interesting in its own right. It supposedly has the same technology inside, greatly reduced size and footprint and therefore price. It doesn't have all the sliders that the Jupiter X does, it just comes down to a bunch of knobs. But within it, it contains the same sort of sound engine. I think the idea that they're putting across in their promotional video is that you play the massive one in the studio or whatever, and then take the little one off with you on the bus or something, and you can work on the same sounds and in the same sort of way. So people have started playing with the XM. That's going to be out any time now, and hopefully I'll get a chance to have a go at Synthfest. I mean, it looks very interesting. It's just this packing full of these different synthesizer technologies. I don't know whether I enjoy that quite so much. I mean, it's also just been Yamaha's birthday, for instance, and they've not released anything new in order to celebrate. They're just given a new paint job to the Montage. And the Montage is another one of these huge synthesizers that, I don't know, I can't feel emotional about. I can't seem to get there. It's just this big behemoth thing with lots of sort of MIDI controls and a big screen. Roland and their Phantom have done the same. They've updated the Phantom, and again, it's this massive workstation with all these different sorts of synthesis and samplers and bits and pieces inside and drum machines and all this jazz. And I really struggle to feel excited by those sorts of workstations. And that's really what Yamaha and Roland both do really very, very well. And there's a market for that. And there's some people, loads of people out there who love it. I find that difficult. I mean, maybe it's because I've not really played on something like that or enjoyed something like that since maybe the Korg M1. That's a long time ago. Whereas now for me, little synths and little bits and explorations into the way things connect together, I find far more visceral, far more connecting, far more engaging and interesting. But that's just me, and I'm here to share my opinion, you know. But we're not to the bottom of this yet, because Roland have also released 2 groove boxes. Not 1, but 2. First one is the MC707. Now this is a return to form, I think, perhaps, on the old groove box front, because this is something Roland have always done well, and they kind of perhaps lost their way, as they have in the past with several things. And other companies like, you know, Electron or Novation have stepped in and filled that sort of void. But now Roland think, okay, now we can have another go at this, and they've brought in the MC707 and the MC101. The MC707 is an 8-track sequencer, sampler, synthesizer, effect box, comes with a whole shed load of content, and it also comes with the same sort of synthesizer engine as the Jupiter XM and the Jupiter X. Exactly what I'm not completely sure, but it has those sorts of sounds. So potentially within the MC707 is a massive synthesizer hiding behind the beats and hiding behind the RGB pads and the sliders and bits and pieces and the sequencing and the track recording. There's a whole load of stuff in there. The MC101 is a 4-track version, which again has a similar synthesizer engine behind that as well. Very exciting. I mean, the MC101 looks very much like a Volca, looking for that kind of angle, that sort of market for small coffee table beats and on the bus type sound making. And that's a nice place to play, you know, and I think Roland can do that very well. What's missing, of course, on both of these is the D-beam. The D-beam, the thing that went bloop bloop and you went shoo. I used to love that on the MC303. We used to play with that in the shop a lot. But with all this new Roland stuff, our friend Bo Beats has done a whole load of videos on it. So if you're interested in the MT77 or 101 or the Jupiter XM, then go and check out his channel for a really thorough sense of what these things are all about. So Buchla then is probably the place where I'm most likely to embarrass myself through my lack of knowing anything really about synthesizers and synthesizer history. And so my quip about it being all about old sort of surfer dudes, I don't really mean that. It's just that I poke fun at things I don't understand in order to deflect from my own ignorance. But anyway, thousands of years ago, right, there's this bloke called Buchla, and he created a synthesizer, and it had something to do with some place in San Francisco that had tapes. I think if I understand it, they had this center. I mean, this is all before the invention of electricity, and so they had making music in the 1960s with tapes. And my understanding is that a bunch of people got together, they smoked a load of drugs, and they made weird sounds with tape machines, and that was your San Francisco Tape Music Center. And into that mix walked an extremely sober, of course, young man called Don Buchla, and he had a bit of a synthesizer. Or no, he went in, or something along the lines of he went in and, you know, can I do something here? And they said, sure, yeah, make some sounds, man. And so he put this thing together, plugged a few bits, and he built a bit of a synthesizer. And they went, wow, man, that's really groovy. And that was kind of about it. And it sat around for a couple of 100 years. Well, now they're going to bring it back. The same one. It's just a bit of a synth. It's in a lovely little sort of upright test machine type console with a bit of a sequencer and stuff going on. Yeah, awesome. Awesome. It's like, I don't know about you, but I only have a certain amount of room in my head for stuff. And as I keep trying to cram more things in there, other stuff falls out the back. But with Buchla, I just can't seem to get it in. I don't seem to have a Buchla-shaped hole in my head that I can just squeeze this stuff into. And so, you know, I merrily talk about Buchla this, Buchla that, wavefolding, West Coast, man. And I can't seem to grasp it. I guess I've never really had any of that or had a go on any of that to really discover what it's all about. I mean, I've played with Music Easel from Arturia, that plugin, and I've gone, I don't really know. And I've also tried out the Korg modular with the little wires, and I'm going, I don't really know. So I struggle a bit with this whole thing. Not that you should. I'm just here telling you about stuff and things. But the other thing they did, other than this big console thing that no one's ever going to be able to afford, they've produced a more compact version of the Music Easel, which is their great sort of suitcase-looking synthesizer. And now they've taken off the touch keyboard thing, made it a smaller kind of desktop module, and improved some of the control voltage connections and revealed a few more bits and pieces to make the workflow a little bit less scientific and more kind of, all right, this might make some kind of sense. It didn't really do much with the price, though. It's still stunningly expensive, but it does drop it down a bit and perhaps puts it within reach of more people, which is interesting. And it's the sort of thing I'd like to sit down and kind of pore over for a few days while drinking heavily. Meanwhile, over in Latvia, Erica Synths have produced this rather remarkable Pico 3 system. Now, their Pico modules are the 3 HP module range that they've been doing for quite a while. They do all sorts of things, you know, oscillators, filters, the whole lot in this Pico size module, which makes for a great little system. And they've released Pico System 1, which was a whole bunch of modules stuck together, and Pico System 2, which is the same deal with their latest bits and pieces all plugged in. And within these systems, they were all individual modules just put in a case, like a curated modular system in a small form. Well, now they've introduced a Pico 3, and I absolutely assumed that it would be the same deal. And it's not. They've taken a slightly strange turn in that rather than putting in individual modules, they've put it all on a single faceplate, on a single PCB, or a couple of PCBs, behind a single faceplate. And this has cut down considerably on the cost of manufacturing, and means that they're able to give us this Pico 3 system for, you know, less money than some of their individual modules are. Something like $400, which is awesome. I mean, that's the price, or cheaper than the price of the Moog Model 32, or the No Coast. And yet this is a properly modular system with all the CV inputs and outputs revealed directly on the front panel with, unfortunately, rather small Pico knobs on the front. And suddenly you have this rather neat, rather smart and fabulously sounding modular system for not a whole lot of money that's a real and genuine dark Erica Synths piece of modular hardware. But not only that, they've also took it upon themselves to squeeze in on the side this strange card slot. Now this is a thing that appeared on Buchla stuff, and I kind of have always ignored it, thinking I don't really know what that's for. So I'm just going to ignore it and we'll talk about other things. But now that it's on an Erica Synth thing, I've had to find out what that's all about. And I can tell you, right, it's for preset cards. Now this is fascinating. I had no idea that Buchla did this or that this was a thing, but apparently it is. The idea is that there is a whole load of stuff going on behind the scenes where everything essentially routes through this card slot. And by putting in a card, a sort of a PCB card, and making various connections on that, it forms connections in the back. And so recalls a preset, if you like. Does that make sense? Now there's two levels to it. You can set it up and make various connections on that card, and that essentially creates the patch. It creates the connections between the different modules and the CV routing and the audio signal routing. So you kind of mirroring what your patches are on the front with your cables onto this card. And you do it literally by soldering bits of wire across various connections. That then goes in the slot, and all those connections are made for you behind the scenes. Brilliant. Now, what it doesn't do is change the pots. So what will the pot set to? Well, there's two ways of sorting that out. You can take a picture of it, draw a picture, have a template, stick it over the top, mark on it, that kind of thing, and then move all the knobs to where they're supposed to be. That's one way of doing it. The other way of doing it is to solder resistors onto the card which match the potentiometer value, if you see what I mean. That's pretty hardcore. I mean, that's what the Buchla cards are supposed to do. That's what you're supposed to do with that. But that comes back to the thing where if you're using Buchla synthesizers, then you're a bit of a scientist or a crazy old man or someone who's very high, and for which case it doesn't really matter what you connect together. It's just going to sound beautiful. So this is a really interesting idea for Erica Synths to adopt. Will it catch on? I mean, you can swap cards with people. You know, you could start a collection, that kind of thing. Maybe, I don't know. It seems like it's quite labor intensive in order to save the idea of a patch. Yeah, interesting. But then, I mean, for me, what it does, you plug that in and the illusion of what you're doing on the surface just disappears because the patch points no longer make any sense, the knob positions no longer make any sense, and so the whole front end visual side of modular just breaks down. But, you know, you don't know until you try, do you? Now I love a brush kit, a kit with brushes. And I don't mean in it, you have to stir the pot and then hit it in some kind of old slow jazz kind of way. I just like the sound of brushes on skins, on drum kits, that kind of thing. Always have. I just think it sounds great. And I've always struggled to find a decent sample set within the drum instruments that you get on your computer. Like, very rarely get a brush kit which is anything other than pathetic. Until now. Now, my friends at Sampleson, now this is a kind of a strange outfit who've been doing a lot of stuff with spectral analysis and other bits and pieces, and some great electric pianos have come out of there, and yet they also do sample stuff, and I get them muddled up as to what they're doing and where they're doing it. But anyway, it doesn't really matter. What they've put together is this rather neat, simple and easy brush kit instrument. It's a brush kit. You have control over, you're sweeping and you're stirring of your brushes, that's fine, and also the intensity and the tuning and bits and pieces, but it just gives you a decent flipping brush kit. And that's brilliant. It's like a breath of fresh air. I can sit there with my finger drumming and go, oh yeah, it's brushes, man. This is just brilliant. It's just something that I really like. Now, G-Storm is a little modular company which has produced some rather interesting and fabulous looking modules for Eurorack. Now these are based on chunks of, supposedly, the Roland SH101. It's taken the oscillator out, taken the filter out, slapped it into two different modules. They look just fantastic, and one has to assume that they sound pretty good too. They're called the 101 VCO and the 101 VCF, and they really have taken the functionality of the SH101 and stuck it onto a Eurorack module. So you've got all the sliders, the mixing, but you've also got individual outputs. You've got the range and the pulse width modulation, and on the filter you've got the color frequency and the resonance on nice little sliders, and modulation controlled by CV. Sound brilliant, look brilliant. If you want something like a 101 in your Eurorack, then this is definitely the place to look. But something which just slightly amuses me is that they very much put forward the idea, oh, this is the SH101, the Roland SH101, that's what it's based on, when actually the feature set is far more like the MS101, because they've revealed the triangle waveform that's in the oscillator that the SH101 didn't have, but the MS101 does, and they've also added the FM side, which again the SH101 doesn't have, but the MS101 does. Now I said I wasn't going to mention Behringer this time, but there's just a little bit of Behringer in there. It's just quite interesting how very quickly the MS101, or MS1 as it is now, just starts to replace the SH101. Now, I haven't heard from Dreadbox for a little while. They had something new at Superbooth, I think, and they've had version 3 of the Erebus. But out of nowhere, they've released this weird Antiphon thing. It's a module, but it's got a whole load of sliders on. And each slider is a sine wave, like 8 sine waves. So it's this device, this module that can generate these huge drones that you can set to chords or melodies or all sorts of stuff. And yet each of them also has an addressable pitch input, and you can either pitch them together or pitch them separately. So is it 8 oscillators? Is it one oscillator with 8 voices? It's not polyphonic as such, but it has, I don't know, it gets a bit confusing. But then within it there's a low pass and there's a high pass filter. So it almost feels a bit like it's a filter bank or a harmonic bank or something that I don't really know what I'm talking about. And then finally there's some reverb on it, and you go, oh, reverb, that's nice. But this is actually a spring reverb in a reverb tank that you would sit somewhere, you'd have to hide it somewhere behind your modular case. But it's there with an analog spring reverb in a tank all ready to go. I think this is just one of the oddest things I've seen in a long time. And get this, it comes as an easy to build kit and it only costs 165 euros. Wow. But like I say, I can't quite get my head around whether this is an awesome thing or whether it's just a weird thing. It certainly takes up a lot of HP, and I'm trying to work out, is the value of it enough? I don't know. I really don't know. But there was another thing in the promo video, which is going on here somewhere, hopefully. They were showing it with all these other very colourful modules, which were just out of focus, just out of reach. You couldn't quite read. And in some places, they were deliberately blurred, making you think, well, what are they about? So it looks like Dreadbox are also about to release a whole stack of new modules. They look very interesting indeed. And so I can't wait to find out what Dreadbox have got up their sleeve. Expert Sleepers has released the ES9. This is a new USB audio interface for Eurorack to connect your Eurorack to your DAW, to your computer. It provides this perfect flow of audio signal and CV between the two. No messing about, no trying to come up with some special cables, no messing about with DC coupled this, that and the other. Is it really working? Is it not? It just works. It has 14 analog inputs that you can use for CV or audio, and those would take your Eurorack stuff into that and into your DAW. So for instance, if you had, I don't know, half a dozen oscillators running through various things, you can take all 6 of those, the resulting signals, and multi-track them directly into your DAW through 6 of the inputs. You can also at the same time take modulation through from something to fiddle around with something within your DAW. And then going the other way, you've got 8 outputs. So if you're running something like the CV tools in Ableton Live or Silent Wave plugins or Bitwig, you could run a whole bunch of control voltage out of your DAW, out of those 8 outputs, and throw them through your rack to modulate and control whatever you like. The ES9 really is the ultimate Eurorack to DAW connection solution. And they've also added a couple of things that make it far, far better than the ES8. And that is to give you some monitor outputs. So, some direct output so that you can use it as an audio interface for your computer without then having to use up some outputs and run that through something to something else in order to be able to hear it. You can just run directly out, which also includes a headphone output, which is vital and useful. Thank you. So yeah, it's a complete winner. I mean, at 500 quid, it feels expensive, which it shouldn't because it's, a 16-in-out audio interface. And they tend to be around that sort of price. And this is a one dedicated for Eurorack, which is going to completely sort out your connection between your rack and your computer like nothing else is going to. Moog have decided to start building the Model 10 again. Now, rewinding to try to get through back into the historical archives, the Model 10 is like a box synthesizer. Like the Model 15 that we had, you got 3 of them or whatever it is, I think. The Model 10 was the one before that where you had a single one full of a bunch of different Moog modules and a sequencer. And it looks like a piece of radio sort of test equipment, in an awesome way. It's there in this fabulous cabinet with these cables drooping off it. It has a couple of oscillators. It's got some randomness in there, a low pass filter, envelope generators, a filter bank, some kind of console panel for controlling things. I think, anyway, it's a fabulous looking piece of history is what it is. Sit there, handle on top, set it down, bunch of things, and it would just make glorious little sounds in the way that perhaps only Moog stuff can, really. It's going to cost you 10 grand, so it better sound pretty awesome. But they're being hand-built over in the Moog factory in the States and lovingly finished and probably delivered to you personally. At the other end of the scale, Novation have launched an updated version of their LaunchKey Mini. It's now the Mini Mark III, and it's pretty fabulous. I've got one right here. Ta-da! I've been reviewing this for Sound & Sound magazine, which is lovely, which means, well, I don't get to keep it. It's what it really means. But it's great. It's a great update to the Mark II. It's got a lot of extra features. No, does it? No, it has 1 or 2 extra features. But what it does have is a lovely, sleek, thin look, much better knobs, much better pads. Basically, the idea is that you control Ableton Live with it. You hit a pad, you do a thing, you record some stuff, you hit another pad, hit a scene launches, clips launches, mute them out, start them going. It's got pitch and modulation wheels are back. It's got this wonderful arpeggiator built in, which has this strange mutate and deviate functions, which pushes the melody around and pushes the rhythm around. It's really a lot of fun. It has a MIDI output as well, which is very, very cool. And so all in all, for under 100 quid, they've almost nailed the MiniKey controller. It's a great size. It fits perfectly with my Surface Pro. The playability, it's all right, The pads, they're all right. And actually, the closeness together of them, the fact that they're quite small, means that your fingers can reach far more sounds than you can on one of the much larger controllers. So yeah, it's neat, it's cool, and you can read my full review in Sound & Sound in a month or 2. Meanwhile, back at Analogue Solutions, remember Analogue Solutions? They did the Treadstone, they did that impulse command that I reviewed relatively recently, and the Fuse box and other fabulous synthesizers like that. Well, they've been sitting around creating this enormous thing called the Colossus, which is a great name for it, I suppose. It's a huge console type synthesizer, all this stuff going on, pin matrices, controllers and mixers, and well, I mean, just take a look. They say it looks very much like the EMS Synthy 100, or a bit like an ARP 2500. I mean, it has that kind of vibe going on. I mean, you can't help but notice a whacking great big oscilloscope stuffed in the middle, or the VU meters waggling about over on the right-hand side. What's it all about? I don't know, but it's going to be at Synthfest, so I'm going to go and have a poke around and see if I can work that out. That's going to be like 25 grand. That's 2.5 of those Model 10s. And actually, that puts a little bit of perspective on it, doesn't it? But it's not the sort of thing that any normal person is ever going to have. And rounding us off this month is the Zeus. It's another polyphonic analog synthesizer. There's a lot of those about. at the moment. It's quite exciting, and this is from GS Music coming out of Argentina. Now they have had a few other bits and pieces before, but it's not the sort of thing you tend to get to see around the place. You have to order them direct, and so in many ways you're kind of buying the thing blind. And that's okay if it's a little mono synth. What is it okay? I don't know, a few $100s. But for something sizable like this, it does make it that bit trickier. Don't know a whole lot about it so far. I mean, the specs itself seem to be along the lines of 12 voices with 2 oscillators per voice, waveform mixing, 2 envelopes, the usual sort of filtering, VCA, LFOs, that kind of bog standard thing. It talks about it being multi-timbral, and so there appear to be different modes with combi modes and unison modes and mono modes, that kind of thing. Sadly, in the demonstration video that they've got going, it all just seems a bit plinky plonky, which is a shame. I mean, I just like to see knobs being moved, you know. I like to see a nice held paddy type chord with things going whoosh, and getting moved about and modulating and stuff. Whereas this is a bit la da 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 da, which is not, I don't think that's how you demo an analog polyphonic synthesizer. But it certainly looks very interesting. The keyboard seems strangely short for the form factor they've gone for, but I kind of like the fact that it looks a bit like a Moog Voyager and yet also look quite futuristic and relatively simple to use, perhaps. I don't know, I just thought I'd put that one out there because I saw it and I thought it looked quite groovy. Right, so coming up then, I've been extraordinarily busy putting things together, doing stuff. You might have noticed a whole load of DIY videos coming out recently as I'm desperately trying to work towards starting that Deckard's Dream build, the build of the synthesizer. And what has happened is that the front plate and case has arrived, which is quite exciting. So this is going to be it. This is the front plate of what's going to become this synthesizer that I'm going to make. It's sort of nuts, isn't it? It's a lovely thing. I have all the components now. The only thing that's stopping me is myself and time and effort. I did my practice on surface mount components in my Pulses build, which you can find in the YouTube channel. And I did another bit of a practice by doing the chopping kinky just to get my soldering and other bits and pieces together. I've got a bunch of tools and everything I think that I need to have a naive and basic idiot soldering go at building the Deckard's Dream. That's very exciting. But that's not the only thing I'm doing. I've got another kit from Buchla. They've sent me the instrument interface to build, which looks really tricky. So I might try to crowbar that in there somewhere in my soldering timetable. And at the same time, they sent me this. What is this? Very interesting. VCMC. Now it's some kind of VC controllable MIDI controller. What does that mean? I don't know. I mean, it has a USB port and a MIDI port, and then it has all these sliders. So I kind of get the feeling that you stuff a load of CV into it, and that then controls MIDI stuff. Or MIDI stuff comes out of it and it controls CV stuff. I don't know. I don't know. It's some kind of interface between MIDI and control voltage. They talked about it using the grid part of Bitwig Studio, so I'm very much interested in seeing how that works. So this I'm going to be plugging in very, very soon, all being well. See, the thing is at the moment is because of this Synthfest thing next week, I've been flat out trying to get everything else done out of the way so that I can spend time on my seminar. I'm practicing what I'm doing. I mean, the plan is to use like a single row like this and kind of build it and talk about it, a basic synth voice. So while I'm thinking about that and churning about that, I also have a open mic night, synth night, tomorrow night that I want to take a single row to. Rather than taking a whole load of stuff to make big sounds, I want to just take a single row and see what I can do with that, which then leads into Synthfest next week. I also want to do a review of my wonderful Tesseract modular Sliderman based mixer, because this I think is just one of the best things I've done in ages. I've also got videos I want to do on the Genki Instruments wavy ring thing. I've got that. I've still got that Nectartech controller keyboard that I want to do a review of. I've got all these synthesizers to do reviews of. I hope you enjoyed the patches I did on the MS-101. I thought that was rather groovy, and I hope to do more patch videos soon on the other synthesizers and bits and pieces. And who knows what I might pick up at Synthfest to bring along and talk about that as well. So there's loads and loads going on. Never mind software. I've got tons of software I'd like to be talking about. So there's no end to it and no end in sight. But what we do have coming up this Saturday is the live stream. Now I know traditionally I do live streams on a Sunday night. It's the Sunday night after I've released a Molten music monthly, and I will continue doing that, all being well, forever. But this weekend I got something else going on the Sunday, and so I can't do it. I just can't be there. What can I say? I think, if I'm right, I'm probably playing Twilight Imperium somewhere. And so the likelihood is that will go on for hours and hours and hours. So I won't be able to guarantee that I can do it Sunday night. So I thought, what the heck, let's do it Saturday night. I think it's important enough with Synthfest the following week to have a bit of a live stream to chat about this month's stuff and to talk about what we might see at Synthfest and to talk about the Decos Dream and other DIY and other bits and pieces, whatever questions or queries or thoughts about this month's news or anything that you want to bring along. We'll have a chat about it. So that's this Saturday. Bring a beer, 8 o'clock, British summertime, as I think it still is, on YouTube. That's the 28th of September. And we'll get together for an hour, maybe 2 hours, have a little bit of a talk, a chat. I might play whatever it was I did on the Thursday night on this single row of modular. That might be fun. I might have the DinoPark together by then. Maybe we can plug in this fella. I don't know. We can do whatever we like because we're like grown-ups and stuff, aren't we? Do whatever we like, we can. So that'd be great. Do come along and join us. Everyone is welcome. It's a load of fun. And then, as I mentioned earlier, the following weekend, the Sunday night after I get back from Synthfest, I'll try to do another one and we'll chat about what I found at Synthfest, what was good, what I liked, and that kind of thing. That might be interesting too. So I think that just about covers it, and that'll certainly do for now. So please join me on Saturday night. Otherwise, I'll see you the following Saturday at Synthfest. You'll be there. Come and say hello. And in the meantime, go and make some tunes.